What has been your closest moment to death? I almost drowned in the ocean in Hawaii. I had swum out from shore, started getting tired, started swimming back, but the current was pulling me out to sea, scary as hell. I started to panic, but I remembered that the side stroke is the one that takes the least energy, so I started doing that and for 10 or 15 minutes just went back towards the shore. I wound up a few beaches south of where I had started. I had to walk north to return to my group. Joplin tornado in 2011. I was in the bathtub as my house was destroyed around me. Edit: I was taking cover in the bathtub, not taking a bath. The light was red, so I put my car to park because it was taking a while longer than usual. It went green and I forgot to take it off park, but as soon as I put it in drive, a semi-truck ran a red light. I was around 3-4, picked up a live electric wire on the ground to play with. Got electrocuted immediately. Good Samaritan grabbed a wooden stick and hit it out of my hands. People told me later that they told my dad not to touch me because I was probably gone. That Good Samaritan saved my life. Acted when no one else did. Being stabbed in the throat and watching blood pump down my shirt to the beat of my heart. Nicked carotid, 31 staples, and 5 days in ICU. I was on the back of my dad's motorcycle and he had a heart attack and blacked out. Bike went over, I hit the ground head first. Luckily he felt something was wrong and slowed down, so it wasn't nearly as close to death for me as it was for him, but it was still super scary. Thank God for helmets. I was jaundiced from severe alcoholism and the doctor said I only had a few more months to live if I kept going. This was 7 years ago. I overdosed on heroin. I was sitting on a couch with 3 other people who had all just shot their dose. I woke up a few 3 hours later, next to 3 dead bodies. I was the only one to come out of it. I walked out and went home, and never said a word about it. This is the first time I'm telling this story. I'll have 7 years clean this August. I had undiagnosed diabetes for about 6 months. My blood sugar was in the 500s. I got to skip the line in the emergency room. The doctors were so scared I was going to go to a coma. Was sat at my computer on the ground floor playing TF2 when a car came through the wall, smashed my desk and computer and almost killed me. The Ariana Grande concert in Manchester Arena in 2017. When a doctor assumed I was diabetic instead of checking my history or labs, and almost shot me up with insulin. I came into the hospital with hypoglycemia and my sugar never goes over 80. But this jerk assumed I was diabetic somehow. I guarantee a lot of you have been closer to death than you realize. The handful of times I've witnessed a near-fatal incident, most often the person who would have died didn't seem to notice. On a motorcycle, going about 58 km/h in a 60 zone I'm quite new to and it was raining, almost slid my bike due to wet leaves, learnt a lesson to never ride in the rain until I've got more experience. LMAO. Stood at the front left of our vehicle in Afghanistan when the front right wheel ran over and detonated an IED. The engine block absorbed the blast and saved my life. E. coli infection in my kidneys and liver. My internal organs were shutting down. Worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. I was living alone at the time, managed to call my father who lived 10 minutes away and through gritted teeth managed to mutter the word hospital before passing out. He rushed me to emerg and I was in and out of consciousness while they ran all kinds of tests and figured out what it was and started an intravenous of a cocktail of meds to fight off the infection. Happy to report I lost no function in any of my organs and was back to normal within a few weeks. Was working on an oyster boat. It was a beautiful day and we were sorting oysters on the boat of the deck. All of a sudden I felt the gentlest of taps on the back of my skull. When I turned around I saw my supervisor, red-faced with the effort of restraining the metal boom, which had come loose and almost slammed right into my head. He was able to slow it down just in time, so I only got that little tap. Guys, basically all muscle. If he hadn't done that I would have been dead for sure. Was delivering pizza as a kid in 2000, just got my license. My Volvo S70. I was going 45 in a 30 bad, and right as I went to turn on this road my brake failure and emergency warning lights came on. My car didn't slow down when I pressed the brake, not one bit. I went straight instead of turning, and my car went straight into an oak tree. The steel frame of that Volvo saved my life. I still occasionally drive by and say hello to the family across the street who got out of bed at 10 p.m. and called the police for me. My stepmom holding me underwater in the bathtub when I was 7-8 and I blackout out and woke up on the bathroom floor with no one around. Waterfall hiking, dipped my foot in on top and was immediately swept under and over about 3 waterfalls. Was very lucky to land where I did, still have a chunk out of my leg to this day. Probably the time I fell out of a tree and blacked out on the side of the road. Woke up to someone with their hand on my chest and slapping my face. Attempted suicide when I was 14. Flatlined once at the hospital. Was airlifted to a bigger hospital, flatlined twice more on helicopter. Flatlined again upon arrival at larger hospital. Was in a coma for 4 days before I woke up. Mental illness sucks. If you are struggling, please reach out to someone. Snorted a line of cocaine. It was fentanyl. Was driving when I did it. Got really hungry and went to Taco Bell. Slumped over behind the wheel in the parking lot. My friend, who supplied the party favors, put the car in park, moved me to the passenger seat, and drove me the 45 minutes home. Woke up to my wife, his wife, and him, while he was rubbing my sternum and slapping me in the face. Been clean for 3 years now. I died. Icy Lake. Was revived. Did not see a light. Pretty focused on staying alive, now. Traumatic experience, at the time I almost drowned when I was 8. I remember it so clearly. We were at a wave pool in a water park. You know, the ones with the motors that make the water swish around in waves. Except the machine malfunctioned. I was with my bio father, and a few of my cousins. The waves were extremely fast and strong. Even my pa was drowning. Those were the longest and most traumatic 60 seconds of my life. I spent about 4 minutes just vomiting water after I got out of the pool. Iraq, I was talking to our interpreter in the street. A sniper popped him in the lungs and then again through the head. Had a stroke and my heat was above 41 degrees for 2 hours straight. Teenager. Jumped by 6 American front scumbags. Woke up in an ambulance with 8 teeth missing, swollen all over, blood all over, and a concussion. I remember what I dreamt when I was knocked out. I remember thinking I was dead. Woke up to my dad holding my hand in the back of the ambulance and looking terrified. I was strapped down, but I remember feeling my face with my tongue and starting to scream, "Where are my teeth?" I had vertigo for 6 months. Couldn't eat normally for like a year. I survived. I began to work out like a madman. Still do decades later. When I hydroplaned out of control on an interstate. My car was perpendicular when I came to a stop. I still have no idea how I wasn't hit. Which time? Super aggressive leukemia. Bone marrow transplant from a then complete stranger literally saved my life. Untreated, death would have been quick. A few years later, sepsis landed me in the hospital for 2 weeks, while 800 miles from home. Fortunately, the strain of E. coli responded to the serious antibiotics. Untreated, 40-50 mortality. And a year after that, again away from home 1,000 miles or so, bacteremia. Another week in the hospital. Got home and spent 4 more days in my local hospital. Cultures grew while I was on